Welcome to Season 2 with the Market Mystics, where we discuss and redefine markets, wealth, and trading on Earth as it is in heaven. Join us on the journey while we consider new possibilities with special guests who might just challenge a few perspectives. Get ready to dive in deep with your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Market Mystics. Josh, you have something very special to share with us today.
I do.
You do? I would really like for you to present that to
us. The special thing is my fiance, who, when you are listening to this, will actually be my wife.
I love that. This is an exclusive episode with the newlyweds while they're on their honeymoon.
That's right. When you guys listen to this, we will be on our honeymoon in an undisclosed location. Not because it's secret, but because we haven't figured it out at this point. Miss Brie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's fun to be here with you guys.
I'm glad you're here. So let's start with the normal, she knows that we've been talking about redefining wealth and capital and all of those fun things. So I want to kick it off just because we tend to ask all of our guests this. What would you say is the wealth that the Lord has given you to carry? Mm-hmm. Like, what is the wealth that you have that needs to be shared with the kingdom?
Mm-hmm. I love this question. It's so big, but it's so beautiful. And unfortunately, my answer rhymes.
Yes.
It just popped in my head. But when you asked me, I was really like, the wealth of myself, like connection with me, has been such a big part of my journey. And in some ways that's like, it sounds simple to say that because like everybody has themselves, but I lived so long not connected to me. And I am definitely still on the journey of connecting to me, liking me, not just putting up with me. So it's not like this completion thing, of course, but to be my own best friend, to enjoy myself, to enjoy my growth, to enjoy where I'm at in the process, not just the perfected Brie way over there who actually doesn't exist.
Right. But
like that I can enjoy me, and that's what I bring to a room. That's what I bring to a friendship. That's what I bring to a marriage. That has been huge. Really huge for me. And I've seen it impact my connection with God. Like nobody ever told me that the more I connected to me, talked kindly to myself, the more I would actually tune into the frequency of what God has always been singing over me. And that almost felt, when I bumped into that a few years ago, that almost felt like, oh my gosh, like this is weird. And like now I'm weird because, like nobody said that. It was just like follow the rules, do what he says. Obedience was heavily emphasized in this way of do it or else, you lose approval and love and safety and all that. And so, I think in summary, the wealth of me, of me just being me, which, is really important for everybody else to be themselves too, and to
That's huge. Like I think that's really important, and I do think that is a huge amount of wealth you're carrying with that. What set you on that journey? Like what was the catalyst?
Yeah. Keep me reined in here because I feel like sometimes when people ask me those questions, I'm like, oh, I was born on April, but I think a lot of it I've kind of studied my childhood the last few years to kind of figure things out and to come into more contact with me. And so the way I was shaped by circumstances, personality, all that was just kind of like being very in tune with what everybody else was feeling in the room, but then there not being space for me to be connected to what I was feeling or experiencing, let alone express it. So I was like this very tuned in kid, like always knew what other people needed in a moment, and yet like very little affect or very, there's not like a lot of space for anger or tears or just even being able to verbalize, I feel scared right now. So just kind of growing up in that, but constantly feeling so much inside. So I've heard, I think it was Graham Cook who says introverts tend to have a very colorful inner life. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I think it's a beautiful description. But that was almost like tormenting to me because there was so much happening inside and I didn't know how to get on the outside. And meanwhile, I thought I had to help and manage everybody else, right, in a room.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that was just kind of normal to me growing up, and it's made me very in tune to people, and it's had benefits in ways, and it's been praised in ways because there's things that come with that. But it was really probably a few years ago, 4 or 5, where I started. I mean, sorry, I'm going back and forth.
Good.
Part of this was, I want to go back to curiosity because I do think that's one of the wealths that I carry. I do think it's intrinsic to every human, but I know that I own it for me. And so in my early 20s, very disillusioned with relationship with God, with church, with all of that. But I couldn't walk away from it either. And so there was just this like, I know there's more, right? Yeah. So constantly feeling that, constantly wanting it, and again, not really knowing how to express it or how to like invite people to walk with me in that. So a lot of that took me on a journey where I'd be meeting people or coming across random YouTube videos or books that seemed random to me, just talking about frequencies, talking about emotions, talking about the like natural laws of the universe and things like that. And so one of these places where I really landed was being curious about emotions and that energy and motion inside of us. And so there were a lot of stops along the way with that, but I eventually did an emotional health course with Christians who were the only ones I'd ever seen combining like the inner healing encounter with God aspect with the practicals of like boundaries and healthy communication and, just some of those tangible things that sometimes we don't consider when we're just like, it's all grace and it's all fun and it's all done, right? And it's like, well, there's also these skills to grow and these relational skills to grow. And so I did this course, and I have ended up working for this company now too, learning how to coach people and meet people in that space, helping people meet themselves and not be afraid to kind of uncover these parts of them they haven't known. So did I answer your question? Because I think I took
You did.
a real broad view.
You did. And I have another question. I was going to write it down because I thought you were still going. But what have you found in your coaching with other people? So you first went through the process of being coached.
Yeah.
And then now you are a coach. What have you found that you can share? Obviously, no like privileged information. But what have you found that most people, like, what is a really common like hump that people have a hard time getting over? The thing that kind of holds them back. One of those aha moments that maybe somebody listening would hear and go, oh my gosh, I needed this.
Yeah. Shame manifests in all kinds of ways. And often the things that we are applauded for are our very areas of shame. So I, in this course, in this program that I did and I now work for, we talk about this in terms of protectors, like things we invite in to protect us because probably in early experience or early childhood, we learned, I can't just be vulnerable and be myself and be safe and protected. So for me, that was perfectionism. Like, great. Like I can't control my own safety, and the big people in my life maybe don't know what I'm needing. And so I'll just invite in perfectionism. If I can be perfect, then I will be safe and I'll be loved and I won't go without, right? So, you know, if you're talking about a Western education system, I mean, yeah, I followed all the rules. I got mostly A's, you know, so all of that's going to be like, so if you look at my childhood report cards, it's like pleasure to have in class and da 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 da. And, you know, like I nailed that. I nailed the education system, right? And I knew how to be the good girl and to get the right answer. But I didn't learn how to fail. I didn't learn how to ask for help. I didn't learn how to be like totally rock bottom and to need something. I wasn't in touch with any of that stuff. So that's kind of what it looked like for me. But I think, you know, shame can be in shutting us down from what we truly want to do and know we're supposed to do, or shame can turn us inwards against ourselves in these ways where we're not actually connected to ourselves, but we're hyper aware of ourselves and how much we hate ourselves. So it's like all the same thing, but I think shame can really manifest in very unique ways. I heard Paul Young say this once, that you could line up a dozen kids and expose them to the same kind of childhood trauma, and each one would manifest it differently. And so I think there's underneath all of this, there's this beautiful message about the intricacy of each human, and there's honor that we must bring to that. Honor we bring to ourselves, honor we bring to others that we are in relationship with or ministering to, where it's not about fixing or having answers, but just being with them and giving them the space to touch that pain or that scariness that that shame has kept them from accessing, and therefore shutting down their entire like design.
That was beautiful. It was.
Yeah. One thing that you sort of touched on, and this has been conversations we've had as well, but is the concept of like parenting yourself now. And you made a comment on the drive up here that I thought was really interesting, that I was wondering if you would expound on. And it was this concept of like having a child to redo, or to hopefully to level up your childhood versus actually going back to the inner child that's in you and parenting it now. And I was wondering if you would just kind of like touch on the nuances of that, and like what's that look like, and how would that actually, you know, impact things?
Yeah. So yeah, I would say 5-ish years ago, maybe a few years before that, I had this heartwarming thought one day of like, oh man, I was such a scared little kid. Maybe God will give me a little girl someday that I can teach, like, you're okay, and let me be with you, and we'll figure it out together. And it was this really heartwarming thought, right? But like now looking back, I'm like, I'm that kid. I get to be that for me. And I think this is the most empowering piece of anything that's hard that we go through, is like, I still have me. And I think this is my favorite part of my job, or just the passion of in me for this emotional health piece, is like, it's me and Jesus inside of me that actually know what my journey has cost and how far I've come. Like, I can share it in relationship, and you see it and you affirm it, absolutely, and that's beautiful. But it's me and Jesus in me that know, like, wow, kiddo, like, you've come a long way, you know? And so reparenting is so empowering. It like connects you back to yourself. And I remember when I was earlier in my emotional health journey, I was just witnessing these mentors of mine who are leading this program I was in, who I love so much. And they were just talking about how they talk to themselves And it was things like, oh my gosh, I'm so cute. I just made a mistake. And I was just like shocked. Like that was not a thought over here that I could even grab, right? I'd never heard someone orient themselves to themselves like that. And I remember there was so much, there was so much little girl in me going, I want to be like them, that naturally, without even trying too hard, I just started doing that in the mirror, right? like, oh my gosh, you're so cute today. I'm with you. You're learning and you're doing such a good job just showing up. And it's really okay that you have no idea what you're doing. I would just like practice that in the mirror or practice that in the car. And it cultivated this more lighthearted conversation with myself. Mm-hmm. And I've pretty much always worked with kids in some capacity. So I feel very like natural and normal with kids. And I really respect children. I'm like, tell me everything you know, like that's how I view them. And so realizing that same openness and tenderness towards an external kid, like I could actually have that towards me, has been such a game changer. And it's a little bit different for me than just speaking affirmations over myself, because those tend to disconnect me from me, because I'm not that wealthy yet, or I'm not that whatever yet, and it's like your brain's like, you're lying to yourself, so there's nuance here that I think we're all being upgraded in. And so it's more of like this, like, no matter what happens, like I'm with you, I'm not going to leave you, and in the car, Josh and I were talking about of course, there's beautiful nuance between what a man and a woman bring in parenting. And there's overlap and, of course, lots of nuance. But to like start thinking of parenting myself in terms of, okay, there's some nurture that needs to happen. There's some comfort. I'm just with you. I'm just in this wherever it takes us. And also like, and we're going to try this new thing. And we're going to take this step forward. I so hear that you're scared, but also we're going to do this, there's this balance. And I think cultivating that within yourself is beautiful. I also think there's an intimate part that the Trinity plays in that. Like we don't just start doing that for ourselves in a vacuum. Like we learn it from a mom and a dad, right? And if all of our parents did the best they could, and so if there are aspects that we didn't get in our earthly parenting, like, God, like, can you show me what mothering myself looks like in this? Can you show me what fathering looks like in this? Because otherwise we'll go to other people and like suck them dry for those things.
Right.
And I think that's still going to happen to some extent. I'm learning even in this dynamic, needs are when a need is met, right? But when a need is not met, that it's just exposing where like, hey, God, like, what is it like to have your love right here in my heart, So instead of these triggers being big, terrifying speed bumps that feel like they're just going to last forever, it's like, oh, what if it was just exposing like, that God's love actually wants to access this part of me. And I've been like, no, I need to get that from here. I need to get that from here, So yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
It was really good. Do you think, I have an idea for myself and I'm asking this question. Do you think that going through the reparenting or parenting yourself in a healthy way like that will shift the way that you then parent your own children?
100%. And I say that without having my own children yet, so I want to say that humbly. But I also was an elementary school teacher, and I watched. That was one of the catalysts. You're asking what prompted this journey. That was one of the biggest catalysts. Is I was a very stressed out 4th grade teacher who realized my emotions aren't that different from my 10-year-olds in my classroom. I had a little boy who all the previous teachers he had came and told me before the school year, like, he's got some anger issues, and that little like rebellious, curious part of me was like, bring it on, I'm going to be in that teacher movie where, the teacher that changed everything or whatever. Well, he was this amazing kid, this very tender kid who didn't know what to do with his emotions. And the more I was getting in touch with my emotions, the more I was able to meet him where he was at. And I could see it wasn't just anger. It was like, oh, I don't know what to do with what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would come up with plans like for what I was going to do and what he was going to do when he got into that state. And it was like this little pact we made, like, you tell me, like, let's have a signal, like when you just need to go walk laps around the trees outside, and I will not ask questions. You can absolutely go, And so we just had this little like bonding thing where like he would give me the signal and he would go out, and it was like empowering him to take care of him, but like me being a big person in his life to say, yeah, that's good. That's what you need. Go do it. And there were also moments too where, this is at the end of the year after we'd worked through a lot. And I said no to something he was trying to do or get out of his assignment. He had stopped doing his work. And I was like, we need to work on this. And he threw his desk over. And I just stayed in me. And I said, not in my classroom, softly like that. And he just melted because he could see like, yeah, I don't treat Miss Aronson like this. Right. And so I'm like, that rapport that we had built where it allowed us both to be ourselves, like I didn't know you could experience that with a kid. And so that taught me a lot about like that parenting thing where like you can stay the parent and stay in connection with this child, it doesn't have to be this like push and pull or just do what I say. Like you can actually have connection in a scary moment. And so that taught me a lot about how I can stay with me in a scary moment or when I want to dissociate or I want to get angry or blame someone else. So, yeah.
That's good.
So one thing that I wrote down while you were talking about this is, have you ever considered or are there people that do like emotional health coaching for kids? Like as they're most of what I have been exposed to is like, okay, now you're an adult, you're trying to work out all these things that happened as a child. Are there people out there who are doing like parent-child or just child coaching?
Here's my opinion. So I just want to be clear that it's my opinion because I've thought about this too. I think that kids are way more pure in their thought processes. And so if we adults will just do our own work, it's like this natural outflow where they just know they can trust you or they know they can come to you if they're hard, they're scary, so I really trust that piece of it that, do I wish I had had a counselor when I was 10? Heck yeah. I think it would have been helpful. But I think parents are the best coaches for their kids because they're teaching them how to regulate themselves, which we don't come knowing how to regulate ourselves, which is really sweet and vulnerable because, like, we have to be taken care of. Like, we have to be taken care of. And that's a lot of work for a parent, but it's like this very sacred thing where we get to be held and get to not know and like where's the food. We're not even thinking about where's the food coming from. It's just we're being met. And so it's my opinion that like parents or just adults in general doing the work, which I don't love that term because any performance Christianity buzzers in you are like, I don't want to do any more work. For me, the work is paying attention to yourself. It's self-awareness instead of like shutting down, cutting off. And dissociation is a beautiful thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's like a necessary thing at times, but like the willingness to like get to know yourself has beautiful ramifications for the children in your own life. In fact, I ended up leaving that teaching job and I look back now and I don't think I had the capacity at that time to understand how to meet 19 little people in a room at once. I'm so grateful for the experience of being with those kids, but the teaching part was not like coming to me at all. And so I knew how to be a human with them, but the teaching part was tough in terms of curriculum. So I gave my notice to my principal and immediately felt like such a relief. And nobody else knew. It was just my principal who knew. But I went out to watch kids at recess, and this one student who had never made eye contact with me, though he'd been with me for a year, he came up. He's like, "Miss Aronson, how are you doing today?" This smile on his face. I've never seen him smile. He's never sought me out. And I immediately knew, because kids read our energy. They may not know the articulation of what's happening, but they read our energy. And so all of that to say, like, if we will just watch over our own hearts as if they were the actual wellspring and the wealth of what comes from us, kids are the first ones to pick it up, and they will be naturally drawn, and they will be themselves, and they will feel safe to bring you their hard stuff. So that's my opinion.
I love it. Love it.
Okay, I have another question. One of the things that I have appreciated a lot in our relationship is the ownership that you take of yourself and your actions and your triggers. How did you get to that place? Because like I've experienced it myself, I've seen with other people, like I think the natural tendency is to say, well, I didn't get this as a child, or this person did this to me, or to kind of shift, but it's and that isn't to take away from the actions of other people, but I've witnessed with you this very like ownership of your journey. How did you get there?
Love, that blesses me so much. Thanks for saying that. I find it very, very empowering to know that at any moment I can have love. And when I'm blaming somebody else, I'm literally like accusing them of like withholding love. Are there times when maybe that's true? Yeah. Like I'm not saying people don't affect one another at all, but all I can do is me. And so I found myself when I would blame or get all twisted up, there was a hardening that happened. And as I've walked with God, I've recognized, you know what, Lord, I actually prefer to be tender. Like that's actually my preferred state. And that means I could get hurt. That means tears could happen. That means a whole host of potentialities that are comfortable and uncomfortable. Yeah. But I would it feels more true and honest to stay tender. And so I like for my heart to feel clean and not cluttered with like, he said, she said, da 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 da. Like it's just, I feel like it's a simpler way to live, to just go, okay, what is happening in me? Do I want to communicate that right now or do I not? Like you always have a choice, right. You know? And I've learned too, you know, I think in our dynamic, like there's times where I'm nervous or scared of something and I like bring it all to you. And then later I'm like, I probably didn't have to bring all that, you know? So I'm learning that too. But in terms of ownership, I mean, again, I was mentored by people who I watched model ownership. So I think that's a huge piece of my journey and a huge part of anyone's journey is like, if you haven't seen this modeled to a place where your own being like gets it and goes, that looks better than what I've seen. Like you may not know it exists, right? Unless God drops it in, which that's totally been part of this too, is just like him giving me like, hey, this is what this feels like, right?
Sure.
But seeing it modeled in relationship, I literally had this thought as I'm watching, you know, over months and years now of this couple who's mentored me in this field. I've literally gone, I've seen way too much to settle for something different than that. I may not replicate it right away, but like I've witnessed what can be. Mm-hmm. And like I'm a goner in the best sense, right? Like, and so I think that's the power, again, going back to reparenting ourselves. The outflow of what happens in that is you literally become a model, whether you ever know it or not, of something people haven't seen before. And like, that is the good leaven, right? That's what spreads. Like it's not even necessarily words. It's like it's the frequency you're carrying, and you're showing people what's possible in that. So the ownership piece has given me my power back in staying connected to me. And also I've gleaned a lot from what was modeled to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good. I can't help but think that in that, like if you're taking ownership over all of the everything in the self, right? That I am thinking back to parenting, then you probably, I'm just spitballing here, probably won't have the need to be the owner of your children. There's a parenting style that is, I mean, it's not like I've never stepped into something like that. Like, I'm the boss, it's me, I'm blah, 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 right? But if you take full ownership of yourself, and you can feel those things, and you can be tender and real and vulnerable and transparent in those things, I can only imagine that outflows to your children and then gets modeled naturally.
Right.
Because that's how you govern yourself. So that's how you govern them.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. And there's a lot out there right now, with attachment parenting and all kinds of styles of just like actually it's important to let your kids see you have a meltdown. Like, of course, there's boundaries with that, and you don't want to be like hashing things out with your spouse, maybe in front of them all the time. But like, for them to see, like, oh, mom cries, oh, mom loses it sometimes. That's actually going to be like, okay, like mom can feel those things, and not make it about me or anybody else, and like, mom can experience those things. I can do that too. It doesn't make me bad or failing or anything like that. Right. And so I mean, I haven't done this yet with kids of my own, but I think we are modeling all the time, and so they're, oh my gosh, kids are so brilliant. I mean, so, and that's what I think about when I'm coaching someone, when I'm with a client, is like, man, that inner child in you is brilliant. Like, we do not pick up these coping mechanisms out of thin air. Like, this is like a very high functioning aspect of us. Like, okay, the protection is not here, so therefore I will do this, or the love's not here, so therefore I will do this. So bringing like honor and respect to those things, and also knowing like if they are modeled something differently, like what's the potential here. And that's essentially what I'm doing with a client, is I'm going to model for you what it feels like to stay with yourself in a scary emotion or in a shut down state, so that it's that much more accessible for you when you're out and about in life and you experience it again.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that modeling concept is important. I know one of the programs we went through with some like premarital stuff was talking about one of the best things you can do for a child is show them conflict with resolution, so that they understand, oh, it's okay if this happens because there's resolution and connection and this thing that comes back. And whether that's with your spouse or whether that's with yourself, like, I think that modeling of what is possible is really what's important. And it goes back to your comment earlier of like, yeah, if we help the parents get to a place where they can model appropriately, the kid will be fine. Like,
Yeah. That resiliency that we all hear about kids being, it's like part of that, like they're learning and they're picking it up and they're spongy. And so, right, it's like, is it about doing it perfectly in front of your kids or your students, or is it about staying true and honest and aware of what's happening inside of you. There was one time I just remembered when I was in the classroom. I worked for an amazing school district, amazing administration, and we had to have a safe space in our classroom. And so mine was like this little canopy with a little pillow, and kids could go there at any moment, like just to calm down and gather themselves. So everybody knew what the safe space was. And one day it was probably like this time of the year, there's like 3 weeks left and everybody's just like losing their minds. And I remember, did you guys as moms ever say, like, when you're growing up, like, nobody call me mom for the rest of the day, where you hear your name so much, it's overwhelming. Well, I was like, okay, everybody, like, here's your word search, right? Please do not say Miss Aronson for the last 30 minutes of school, right? We're just going to get through this, right? So they're sitting there, they're getting louder, they're getting louder, they're getting louder. So I go put myself in the safe space. You could hear a pin drop, and then I start hearing these whispers. You guys, she's in the safe space. You guys, she's in the safe space. And I was like in there kind of giggling to myself and just like calming down. But I was like, that was a really fun moment of modeling, that like, yeah, your teacher needs a minute, and yeah, that was a fun moment. Just popped in my head.
I love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
I don't think so. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to have this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure Kim has.
Of course. Okay. I always get excited when Brie wants to come around.
That's
I'm
true.
like, can we be best friends? So, of course, I'm honored that you would come on, that you would even want to come in studio. That's even better because then we get to share space.
Yeah,
hopefully we'll get to talk again soon, whether on the podcast or not.
Yeah.
I would love that. Yes.
And in the meantime, enjoy your honeymoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Little message for the future. Yeah.
In the description of the show, we will link your social medias. So if people are interested in emotional health coaching, you are a coach and have availability to work with people. So
Yeah,
we
that's
will
great.
put some of that in there for people who are interested.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Awesome. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for sticking around. Listen for new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Find us on all social media platforms by searching for Market Mystics. Don't forget to follow and subscribe. Visit upperroomcd.com where you can find more information about the hosts, projects, and guests. Go deeper by booking a coaching appointment focused on redefining identity and wealth in your life. See you next time.